She's kidnapping my son. A poor maid is dragged across marble floors like she is dirt, not a human being. One lie from a rich woman turns 3 years of loyal service into a stain on her name. One broken glass becomes a crime, and suddenly every door in the city slams in her face. She is blacklisted without proof, judged without a hearing, and called dangerous for loving a lonely baby too much. The world believes the diamonds, not the tears. She thought being fired was the worst humiliation of her life. She has no idea what they are still planning to do to her. The SUV's headlights carved wild arcs through the storm as Ray wrestled the wheel, rain hammering the windshield like bullets. In the back seat, Leela clutched baby Ishan tighter against her chest, her knuckles white, her heart a drum of pure terror as she realized what Ray had been shouting over the roar of the engine. The brakes were gone. The luxury vehicle, steel, leather, and a year's worth of her wages had become a coffin hurtling down the empty highway at 90 kilometers an hour, and there was nothing between them and the concrete barrier ahead but a few seconds of screaming metal and prayer. "Hold him, cover his head," Ray's voice cracked as he yanked the emergency brake. Nothing, and the world tilted violently. The impact was a symphony of destruction, glass exploding inward, airbags detonating like bombs, the sickening crunch of metal folding in on itself. Leela's shoulder slammed against the door, pain white-hot and blinding, but her arms never loosened around Ishan. She twisted her body, making herself the barrier between the baby and the shattered window, feeling shards slice through her uniform as the SUV spun, flipped, and finally crashed onto its side in a ditch, smoke pouring from the crumpled hood. For a moment, silence, just the hiss of steam and Ishan's thin, terrified wailing. Then fire, small but growing, licking out from under the dashboard. Leela ignored the blood running down her face, ignored the way her left arm hung useless, and dragged herself forward through the wreckage. She pressed Ishan against her chest with her good arm, using her body as a shield as she crawled over broken glass toward the rear door, which had been torn half off its hinges. The baby screamed, his little fists tangled in her hair, but he was whole. She could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady, and that was all that mattered. She had just pulled them both onto the wet grass when headlights flooded the scene, another SUV, sleek and untouched, rolling to a stop. The door flew open and out stepped Karishma, the billionaire's fiancée, her designer heels somehow pristine despite the mud, her face a mask of theatrical horror. "Oh my God, the baby, someone help." Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer, and Leela felt a cold dread settle over her even as she held Ishan, rocking him, whispering that he was safe. Karishma was crying now, sobbing into her phone, and Leela heard the words that would shatter her life. "She tried to take him, she forced our driver to go, she was kidnapping my fiancé's son." 2 officers emerged from their vehicle, rain streaming off their caps, and one of them gently but firmly took Ishan from Leela's arms. The baby reached back for her, his face red and wet with tears, his mouth forming her name in a way that only she could understand. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." Cold metal closed around her wrists. Handcuffs. Leela, kneeling on the asphalt, bleeding, exhausted, looked up at Karishma through the rain and saw the ghost of a smile flicker across that beautiful, lying face. What she discovers next will change everything. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss how this story unfolds. 2 weeks earlier, the Malik mansion had been a different kind of prison, one dressed in marble and morning light. Leela moved through the grand foyer with a mop and bucket, her reflection, a small, dark figure against the polished white stone that stretched endlessly in every direction. Chandeliers hung overhead like frozen stars, and the air smelled faintly of imported lilies and furniture polish. She had worked here for 3 years, long enough to memorize every inch of the estate, long enough to know that beauty and wealth did not guarantee kindness. Upstairs in the nursery, baby Ishan was crying again. Leela set down her bucket and hurried up the grand staircase, her worn sneakers silent on the thick carpet. The nursery was a palace in miniature. Hand-carved crib, toys from Europe, a ceiling painted with clouds and birds. But none of it mattered to the 7-month-old boy who sat alone in his crib, tears streaming down his chubby cheeks, reaching his little arms toward the door. "SHH, I'm here, John," Leela murmured, scooping him up. Ishan buried his face in her shoulder, his sobs softening to hiccups. She swayed with him, humming an old lullaby her mother had taught her, the same one she sang to her little brother, Ravi, back in the tenement across the city. This was the part of her job no one had hired her for, but it was the part she loved most. Ishan's mother had died in childbirth, and his father, the elusive billionaire Rayan Malik, had not been seen in months, reportedly drowning his grief abroad. That left the baby in the care of staff, and more specifically, in the indifferent hands of Karishma, the glamorous fiancée who treated Ishan like an inconvenient accessory to her new life. As if summoned by the thought, the door swung open and Karishma swept in, still wearing last night's cocktail dress, her makeup smudged, her phone glued to her ear. "No, tell them I'll post the charity thing tomorrow, I just got home." She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes landing on Leela. "Why is he crying? I pay people to make sure he doesn't cry." "He was alone," Leela said quietly, still rocking Ishan. "Babies need, I don't need a lecture from the help." Karishma's voice was ice wrapped in silk. She ended her call and tossed her phone onto the velvet armchair. "Put him down. I have investors coming for brunch in an hour and I need this house perfect. Where's Sharma? He's overseeing the garden setup, ma'am." "Good. You go finish the foyer and then start on the guest bathrooms. And for God's sake, try not to look so poor. It's depressing." Leela bit the inside of her cheek and gently placed Ishan back in his crib. He immediately began to fuss again, reaching for her, and it took everything in her not to pick him back up. But Karishma was already turning away, examining her reflection in the ornate mirror, and Leela knew better than to push. She returned to her work, moving through the mansion like a ghost, invisible to the wealthy people who lived and visited there. By late morning, the estate was filled with the kind of guests who measured their worth in commas. Investors in sharp suits, society wives in pastels, influencers with perfect smiles and phones perpetually raised. Karishma held court on the terrace, laughing two loud, touching arms, performing the role of the gracious almost wife with practiced ease. Leela stayed in the background, refilling water glasses, clearing plates, trying not to think about the fact that the food being thrown away could feed her and Ravi for a week. Then she heard it, a soft thud, followed by the beginning of a wail. Her head snapped toward the sitting room, where Karishma had placed Ishan on the sofa, propped up with pillows, while she posed for photos nearby. The baby had been squirming, and now he was sliding, tipping. Leela didn't think. She dropped the tray she was holding and lunged across the room, her body moving on instinct. She caught Ishan just as he rolled off the edge of the sofa, cradling his head, but her momentum sent her crashing into a side table. The champagne flute perched there toppled, shattering against the marble floor, liquid splashing across the Italian leather shoes of a man in a $5,000 suit. The room went silent. "Oh my God," Karishma gasped, rushing over, not to check on Ishan, but to survey the damage. "I am so sorry, Mr. Khanna. She's usually more careful." The investor looked down at his ruined shoes, his expression unreadable. Leela, still holding Ishan, felt her face burn with humiliation. He was falling. "She's obsessed with the baby," Karishma said, her voice pitching higher, tears suddenly glistening in her eyes. "I've noticed it before. She hovers," she interrupts, "she acts like he's hers. It's actually quite disturbing." Sharma, the estate manager, appeared as if by magic, his thin face twisted with concern that Leela knew was entirely fake. "Ma'am, I have also observed this behavior. Just yesterday, I saw her in the nursery when she was supposed to be cleaning the library." "Because he was crying," Leela's voice cracked, desperation clawing at her chest. "No one else was. Enough." Karishma took Ishan from her arms, and the baby immediately began to scream, reaching back for Leela. "You're clearly not stable. You could have hurt him. You could have hurt our guest. I think it's time we acknowledge that you're a danger to this household." The guests were watching now, a silent jury of wealth and judgment. "Ma'am, please, you're fired." Karishma's voice rang out, clear and final. "And I'll make sure every agency in this city knows exactly why. You'll never work in a respectable home again." Security was already moving forward. two men in black uniforms who gripped Leela's arms with professional detachment. She tried to pull free, tried to look back at Ishan, who was sobbing now, his little face red and wet. "Please just let me say goodbye." But they were already dragging her toward the service entrance, past the staring staff, past the kitchen where she had eaten her meals alone, past the small locker where her few belongings waited. They shoved her out the back gate, and the metal clanged shut behind her like the door of a cell. Leela stood on the dusty service road, her uniform torn, her heart in pieces, and listened to the sound of Ishan crying her name in a language only she could understand. The room Leela returned to that evening was barely large enough to be called a room at all. It was a concrete box in a crumbling tenement, one of dozens stacked on top of each other like a filing system for the city's forgotten. The walls were stained with damp, the single window looked out onto a brick wall, and the bathroom down the hall was shared by 8 families. But it was hers, and more importantly, it was where Ravi waited. Her 13-year-old brother sat cross-legged on the thin mattress, his inhaler clutched in one hand, his homework spread around him in a careful circle. When he saw her face, his smile faded. "Didi." "What happened?" Leela set down her bag, a plastic grocery sack containing her name badge, a spare uniform, and 37 rupees, and sat beside him. "I lost my job." "Why? You're the best worker they have. You told me they always said, it doesn't matter what I did." Her voice was flat, empty. "It matters who I am." She counted the money again, uselessly, as if the bills might multiply under her fingers. Rent was due in 4 days. Ravi's asthma medication cost 200 rupees. She had nothing. Over the next week, Leela walked the city until her feet bled. She knocked on doors of mansions and estates, clutching a handwritten resume that listed 3 years of excellent service. But word had spread faster than she could run. At one house, the hiring manager took one look at her name and shook her head. "You're the girl from the Malik place, aren't you? The one who nearly dropped the baby?" "That's not what." The door closed. At an agency, the woman behind the desk barely looked up from her computer. "Sorry, we have a policy about blacklisted employees." Liability issue. At a third house, a fourth, a fifth, the answers were variations on the same theme. "We've heard things. We can't risk it. We have to protect the family." Karishma's influence stretched further than Leela had imagined. She took whatever work she could find, washing dishes at a roadside cafe for cash under the table, scrubbing floors at a clinic after hours, carrying boxes at a market. The money was barely enough to keep them fed, let alone housed and medicated. But she never complained to Ravi, never let him see how close they were to the edge. One evening, sitting on a low wall outside a tea stall, sharing a single plate of greasy samosas, Ravi asked her the question she had been dreading. "Do you miss him, the baby?" Leela stared at the traffic moving past, a river of metal and exhaust, and felt the ache in her chest deepen. "Every second. Do you think he misses you?" "I don't know. I hope he forgets me. It would be easier for him." But she didn't believe that. She dreamed of Ishan every night, his laugh, the way he curled his fingers around hers, the warmth of his small body against her shoulder. She dreamed of him crying in the dark, calling for her, and waking up alone. Late one night, when Ravi was asleep and the tenement was quiet except for the hum of distant generators, Leela walked across the city to the edges of the Malik estate. She couldn't get close, the gates were locked, the guards on duty, but she could see the mansion from a distance, a palace of light against the black sky. She found the nursery window, glowing softly on the second floor, and imagined Ishan inside, tucked into his expensive crib, surrounded by toys that would never love him back. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the baby who couldn't hear her. "I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you." But even as she said it, she made herself a promise. If Ishan was ever in danger, real danger, she would find a way back. She would fight every lie, every closed door, every person who said she was nothing. Because the truth always mattered, even when the world refused to see it. 300 kilometers away, in a private office that smelled of leather and old money, Rayan Malik sat across from his lawyer and stared at the medical report in his hands. "Sedatives," he said quietly. "Someone has been giving my son sedatives." The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Meera, nodded. The family doctor flagged it. He's been under pressure to prescribe stronger doses and he's uncomfortable. He says Ishan doesn't have any medical condition that would justify it. Rayan set the report down, his jaw tight. He had spent the last 6 months abroad, drowning in grief after his wife's death, convinced that his son was better off in the care of his household staff and his fiancée. Karishma had seemed so eager to step into the role of mother, so polished and reassuring in her video calls. But now, hearing this, who's pressuring the doctor? Karishma, and your estate manager, Sharma. They say Ishan is difficult, that he cries too much, that it's disruptive. He's a baby. Rayan's voice was cold, controlled. Babies cry, that's what they do. I know, but if you confront her directly, she'll spin it. You know how she is. She's got the media, the board, half your investors charmed. If you accuse her without proof, then I need proof. Rayan stood, pacing to the window. Outside, the city glittered, indifferent. I need to see what's really happening in my own home without the performance. Mira leaned back in her chair, studying him. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that billionaires are very visible, but drivers, cooks, cleaners. No one looks at them twice. It took 3 days to arrange. Rayan cut his hair short, let his beard grow in, traded his tailored suits for cheap jeans and a plain shirt. Mira contacted a staffing agency and had him placed as a temporary chauffeur, just another faceless worker rotated in to cover a schedule gap. Only Mira, the family doctor, and Rayan's elderly mother knew the truth. When he walked through the service entrance of his own mansion, he barely recognized it. The gleaming floors, the vaulted ceilings, the art that had cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, it all looked different from this angle, colder and more hostile. Sharma met him in the staff break room, barely glancing up from his tablet. You're Ray, right? From the agency? Yes, sir. Don't call me sir. I'm not your friend. I'm your supervisor. You'll drive Miss Karishma wherever she needs to go, you'll keep the cars clean, and you'll keep your mouth shut about anything you see or hear. Understood? Understood. Sharma's smile didn't reach his eyes. Good. We just got rid of a maid who couldn't follow simple rules. Don't make me do the same with you. Rayan kept his face blank, but his mind filed the comment away. A maid who? Over the next few days, he learned the rhythms of his own house from the inside. He saw how Karishma treated the staff, snapping her fingers, calling them by the wrong names, throwing tantrums if her coffee was too hot or her car wasn't ready fast enough. He saw how Sharma hovered around her, enabling every cruelty, smoothing over every complaint. And he saw Ishan, his son, pale and quiet, sitting in his playpen with dull eyes, barely reacting even when toys were placed in front of him. The baby Rayan remembered from 6 months ago had been lively, curious, quick to smile. This child looked sedated, because he was. One afternoon, Rayan overheard Karishma on the phone in the back of the car while he drove her to a spa appointment. She thought the partition was up. It wasn't, not completely. I don't care what the doctor says, the kid screams every time I have an event, just up the dose a little. It's not like anyone's going to check. Rayan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. That night, back in his tiny staff room, barely larger than a closet, he called Mira. I need her gone, he said, but I need it airtight. She's a manipulator. If I move too fast, then she'll cry victim and drag your name through every tabloid in the country, Mira finished. I know, we need evidence, hard evidence. I'll get it. But the next morning, something unexpected happened. During a staff meeting in the kitchen, Sharma mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that the former nanny, Leela, was being rehired on a probationary basis to handle laundry and floors. Karishma had agreed, apparently, because a donor to one of her charities had made some comment about second chances and she wanted to look magnanimous. She's not to touch the baby, Sharma warned the room. She's not to go near the nursery unless instructed. If I catch her breaking that rule, she's out permanently. Got it? The staff nodded, murmuring agreement. Rayan felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. Leela. The maid who had been fired, blacklisted, erased. He didn't know her story yet, but he knew enough to recognize the shape of injustice. When she arrived the next day, walking through the service entrance with her head down and a battered duffel bag in her hands, he watched her from across the garage. She was young, thin, her uniform too big on her frame, but there was something in the way she held herself, tired, yes, but not broken, not yet. She glanced up once, briefly, toward the second floor where the nursery sat, and the look in her eyes made Ryan's throat tighten. She wasn't here for the paycheck. She was here for Ishan. And somehow, he knew that whatever was coming, the two of them, an undercover billionaire and a disgraced maid, were going to need each other. Leela had expected cruelty when she returned to the Malik mansion, and she was not disappointed. Sharma handed her a list of duties so long it would take 16 hours to complete, then informed her that she had 8. Karishma barely acknowledged her existence, except to make pointed comments about second chances and generosity whenever guests were around, as if Leela were a rescued stray rather than a human being. The other staff avoided her, afraid of being associated with someone so publicly disgraced, but none of it mattered because she could see Ishan again, not up close, not yet. But she caught glimpses, through doorways, across hallways, in the garden where a nanny Leela didn't recognize pushed his stroller in slow, disinterested circles, and every glimpse broke her heart a little more. He wasn't the same baby she remembered. His laughter was gone. His eyes, once so bright and curious, were dim, unfocused. He moved sluggishly, as if the world were made of water and he was drowning in it. One afternoon, while mopping the hallway outside the nursery, Leela heard the private nurse, a stern woman named Kavita, speaking on the phone. "I don't know, the dosage seems high for his age. I'm just saying, if something happens, yes, I understand Miss Karishma is the guardian, but no, of course I won't question it again." Leela's blood turned to ice. Dosage, medication, for a healthy baby. She wanted to storm into the room to demand answers, but she knew what would happen. She would be fired again, this time permanently, and Ishan would be even more alone. So she stayed quiet, she watched, and she waited. It was Ray, the new chauffeur, who first spoke to her as if she were a person. They crossed paths in the staff break room one evening, both grabbing late dinners after the family had eaten. He was older than her, maybe early 30s, with a rough beard and tired eyes, but there was something about the way he looked at her, not with pity or judgment, but with recognition. "You're Leela," he said. "Yes, they talk about you." The other staff, she stiffened, waiting for the accusation, but it didn't come. "They say you saved the baby," Ray continued, his voice low. "That you caught him when he fell and got blamed for it. It doesn't matter what I did," Leela said quietly. "It matters what people believe." Ray was silent for a moment, stirring his tea. Then, "I think something's wrong here." She looked up sharply. "What do you mean? The baby? Ishan, he's always drowsy. And I've heard things, Karishma and Sharma talking about keeping him quiet, about making sure he doesn't interfere with her schedule. I think they're drugging him." Leela's breath caught. Hearing someone else say it out loud made it real, undeniable. "I've thought the same thing," she admitted. "But what can we do? I'm just a maid. You're just a driver. If we accuse her, she'll destroy us." Ray's jaw tightened. "I know, but we can't just let it happen." "Then what?" He met her eyes, and for the first time since she'd returned to the mansion, Leela felt like she had an ally. "We get proof," Ray said, "something they can't deny." Over the next few days, they moved carefully, like thieves in a palace that didn't belong to them. Leela started paying closer attention to the nurse's visits, noting times, dosages, and the way Ishan looked before and after. Ray, with more freedom to move around as a driver, began leaving his phone in strategic places, recording conversations. The breakthrough came on a Thursday night. Ray had driven Karishma to a boutique opening, and while waiting in the car, he'd slipped back into the mansion through the service entrance. He left his smartphone charging in the small lounge off Karishma's private office, a room she often used for calls she didn't want overheard, and then made himself scarce, pretending to clean the cars in the garage. When he retrieved the phone an hour later and listened to the recording, his hands shook. Karishma's voice, crystal clear, "I don't care if the doctor's uncomfortable, the brat is in the way. Every time I have a photo shoot, every time I have investors over, he cries or makes a mess. The sedatives keep him manageable." Sharma's voice, oily and agreeable, "Of course, Miss Karishma. And if we can show that his behavior is erratic, that he needs constant medical supervision, it strengthens your case for full guardianship once the trust paperwork goes through. Exactly. Rayan's mother is old and sentimental, and the board is full of idiots who think I should be playing house. But if I'm the only one who can handle Ishan, they'll have to give me control. And once I have that, a pause. The sound of liquid being poured, wine maybe. Once you have that, Sharma finished, the money is yours to manage as you see fit, and Rayan will never have to know. Rayan is too busy mourning to care. And even if he comes back, what's he going to do? I'm his fiancée, the media loves me, I've positioned myself perfectly. They laughed then, and the sound made Ray feel sick. He met Leela in the staff courtyard that night, away from cameras, and played her the recording. She listened with her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She's poisoning him, Leela whispered. Not to kill him, but to break him, to make him dependent. And she's planning something worse, Ray said grimly. I heard her talking to Sharma yesterday about a final solution to you. She doesn't trust you. She thinks you're too close to Ishan, that you might notice something. What kind of solution? I don't know yet. But we need to be ready. He handed her a small card, plain white, with a phone number written in pen. If anything happens to me, if I'm not around, call this number. It's someone who can help. Leela took the card, her hands trembling. Who is this? Someone who wants to protect Ishan as much as we do. That's all you need to know. She wanted to ask more, but Ray was already standing, glancing toward the house. Be careful, Leela. People like Karishma don't fight fair. I know, but knowing didn't make her ready for what came next. The gala was announced with the fanfare Karishma loved best. Gilded invitations, press releases, a full social media campaign. It was to be a charity auction in honor of Ishan, raising money for children's hospitals, with Karishma positioned as the elegant, selfless, almost mother. The subtext, which everyone understood but no one said aloud, was that this was also the night the trust fund revisions would be quietly signed, transferring full financial control to her. Leela was not invited, of course. She was assigned to deep clean the kitchens and stay out of sight. But the morning of the gala, Karishma surprised everyone by softening toward her. Leela, she called, her voice honey-sweet, as Leela was scrubbing a counter. Come here, Leela approached cautiously, expecting a trap. I've been thinking, Karishma said, perching on a stool and examining her manicure. Maybe I've been too hard on you. You made a mistake, but everyone deserves a second chance, right? Leela said nothing. I need someone to take Ishan to a last-minute pediatrician appointment this afternoon. The nanny is busy with gala prep, and I trust you with him. You've always been devoted. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. I'd be honored, Leela said carefully. Good. Karishma handed her a glass of mango juice, condensation beading on the sides. Drink this, you look pale. Can't have you fainting on me. Leela took the glass, and as she raised it to her lips, she saw Ray across the room, his eyes wide, shaking his head in a tiny, urgent gesture. But Karishma was watching her, waiting. Leela drank. The drug worked slowly. By the time they were in the car, Ray driving, Leela in the back with Ishan, her head felt heavy, her limbs sluggish. She tried to focus on Ishan, on keeping him calm, but her vision kept blurring. Ray, her voice was thick, wrong. Something's wrong, I know, hold on. His voice was tight, controlled, but she could hear the fear beneath it. The car was moving too fast. She felt it in her stomach, the way they took corners too hard. And then Ray's voice, sharp and panicked. The brakes, they're not working. Leela looked down at Ishan, his big eyes staring up at her, and even through the fog of the drug, she knew this was the trap. This was how Karishma would get rid of her. The rest happened in pieces, fragments of horror, the screech of tires. The world is spinning, glass shattering. Her body wraps around Ishan, making herself his shield. The impact, the pain, the fire. And then Karishma's face, leaning over her as she lay bleeding on the asphalt, her voice loud enough for the cameras. She tried to take him. She forced our driver. She's insane. Handcuffs. Cold metal. Ishan screams her name. Darkness. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and failure. Leela drifted in and out of consciousness, her body wrapped in bandages, her mind trapped in a fog of pain and medication. A police officer sat outside her door. The television in the corner played news reports on mute, and she didn't need sound to understand. Her face, her name, the word kidnapping in bold letters. She had lost, or so she thought, until she heard voices. Karishma's voice, too loud, too confident, completely sedated. No way she can hear us. Sharma's voice, smug and cruel. Good, this couldn't have worked out better. Drugged juice, cut brakes, a cooperative police inspector, all exactly as planned. If she'd actually died in the crash, it would have been even cleaner, but this works. She's ruined, and no one will ever believe her. And the baby, unharmed. Perfect optics, you're a hero, they laughed. Leela wanted to scream, but her body wouldn't obey. She tried to move, to open her eyes fully, but she was trapped. Then another voice, quieter, tense. You're monsters, Ray. Oh, the driver, Karishma said dismissively. How's your head? That concussion looked nasty. I know what you did. I know you drugged her. I know you sabotaged the car. And who's going to believe you? Sharma's voice was nice. You're a temporary worker. No one even knows your real name. A pause. Then Ray said very quietly, I do. Footsteps, the sound of a door closing. And then, after a long silence, a new voice, a woman, older, with the kind of authority that didn't need to shout. My son is alive then. I wasn't sure. Leela's eyes cracked open just enough to see an elderly woman in an elegant sari standing in the doorway, flanked by a man in a suit and a nervous-looking doctor. Mother, Karishma's voice had lost its confidence. Don't call me that. The old woman, Rayan's mother, stepped into the room, and Leela realized there were others behind her, the police inspector, looking pale, and two uniformed officers who were not friendly. You are not my family. You are a parasite. I don't know what he told you, but Rayan told me the truth. The old woman gestured, and Ray stepped forward, pulling the disguise away, the beard, the rough clothes, revealing a face Leela had only seen in photographs on the walls of the mansion. Her breath stopped. Ray was Rayan Malik, the billionaire, Ishan's father. He held up his phone, and Karishma's voice poured out of it, the lounge recording, the hospital confession, every damning word. You drugged my son, Rayan said, his voice shaking with fury. You drugged an innocent woman. You sabotaged a car and tried to frame her for kidnapping, and you did it all for money. That's out of context. We also have the mechanic's report, the lawyer said, holding up a folder. The brake lines were deliberately cut, and the hospital found sedatives in Miss Leela's system, matching the prescription you pressured Dr. Ear to write. The doctor stepped forward, his face miserable. I'm so sorry. She threatened my license if I didn't comply. I should have reported her sooner. Sharma tried to run. He actually turned and bolted for the door, but the officers were faster. He was on the ground in seconds, handcuffed, shouting that it was all Karishma's idea, that he was just following orders. Karishma stood frozen, her perfect face finally cracking, tears streaming down her cheeks, but these were real, ugly tears of panic, not performance. Rayan, please, I love you, I did this for us. You did this for yourself. His voice was cold, final. And you nearly killed my son. The officers moved forward. Ma'am, you're under arrest for attempted kidnapping, child endangerment, conspiracy to commit fraud. Karishma's scream echoed down the hospital hallway as they dragged her away. Rayan turned to Leela, who was staring at him with wide, disbelieving eyes. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm sorry I didn't see the truth sooner. I'm sorry I let this happen to you. Leela tried to speak, but her throat was too tight. She managed one word, Ishan, safe with my mother, asking for you. Tears spilled over, hot and helpless, and Rayan gently took her hand. You saved him, he said, twice. Once from the fall, and once from the people who were supposed to protect him. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you are never punished for doing the right thing again. The police inspector stepped forward, looking deeply uncomfortable. Miss Leela, all charges against you have been dropped. We will also be investigating how this case was handled. I apologize for my role in this. Leela nodded, too exhausted to feel anything but relief. As they wheeled her toward a private room, one with flowers and soft light and no guards, she heard Rayan speaking quietly to his mother. I want her protected. A real contract. Legal guarantees. Whatever she needs. "And what about you?" his mother asked. "What do you need to be a better father, starting now?" 6 weeks later, the mansion felt like a different place. Sunlight poured through windows that had been opened for the first time in months, curtains pulled back, fresh air replacing the stale perfume of wealth and lies. The staff moved with less fear, talking in normal voices instead of whispers. Sharma was gone, arrested, and awaiting trial. Karishma's face was plastered across every tabloid, her influencer empire in ruins, her charity donations revealed as carefully staged tax dodges. And Leela stood in the nursery, watching Ishan play with blocks on the carpet, his laughter bright and real. He had recovered quickly once the sedatives were stopped. His eyes were clear now, his movements confident and curious. He was, in every way that mattered, a normal, healthy, joyful baby. "He missed you," Rayan said from the doorway. Leela turned, still getting used to the sight of him in casual clothes, his face clean-shaven, his eyes no longer hidden behind a disguise. "I missed him too." Rayan stepped into the room, kneeling beside Ishan, who immediately crawled into his lap. "My mother and I have been talking about the household, about Ishan's care, about what happens next." Leela's chest tightened. Here it was, the polite dismissal, the generous severance, the end. "We want you to stay," Rayan said. "Not as a maid, as Ishan's lead caregiver, his nanny officially, with a proper contract, proper pay, legal protections, and a college scholarship fund for your brother." She stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You don't owe me anything," she whispered. "I owe you everything. You protected my son when no one else would. You risked your life for him twice." He stood, Ishan balanced on his hip. "And more than that, he loves you, he trusts you. I'm not going to take that away from him again." Tears blurred her vision. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Yes." Ishan reached for her then, his little arms outstretched, and she took him, holding him close as he buried his face in her shoulder. She felt Rayan's hand on her back, steady and warm, and for the first time in months, she let herself believe that this was real, that she was safe, that the nightmare was truly over. That night, alone in her room, no longer the concrete box in the tenement, but a real bedroom in the mansion's staff wing, with a window that looked out over the garden. Leela knelt beside her bed and pulled out the old suitcase she had always kept packed. For 3 years, that suitcase had been her security, her escape plan, proof that she could leave at a moment's notice if the world turned cruel again. She had never unpacked it, never let herself believe she could stay anywhere permanently. But now slowly, carefully, she opened it and took out her few belongings. 2 spare uniforms, a photograph of her mother, Ravi's inhaler prescription, a tiny stuffed bear she'd bought for Ishan and never had the chance to give him. She folded the uniforms and placed them in the dresser. She set the photograph on the nightstand. She put Ishan's hospital wristband, still around her own wrist since the crash, in a small box alongside her mother's old earrings. And then she slid the empty suitcase under the bed, out of sight, no longer needed. Tomorrow, she would call Ravi and tell him the good news. Tomorrow, she will start her new job, her new life. Tomorrow, she will watch Ishan grow up safe and loved. But tonight, she simply stood at the window and looked out at the garden, where the first flowers of spring were beginning to bloom. In a world that often measures worth by wealth and status, truth remains the quiet force that outlasts every lie. Leela had been powerless, dismissed, nearly destroyed, but her courage, and the courage of one man willing to see past his own privilege, brought justice when the system failed. What would you have done in her place? If you've ever fought for the truth when everyone told you to stay silent, drop a comment below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness and bravery still matter. Because in the end, it's not the size of your bank account that defines you, it's the strength of your heart.